Protestors challenge transgender athletes in sports. Trump visits China, and America's talking. This is the Center Square Daily. It is Wednesday, May 13th, 2026. I'm your host, Esther Wickham, standing in for Greg Bishop. First, starting off with education, a growing controversy in the state of California over transgender participation in girls' sports is drawing attention from athletes, advocacy groups, and political leaders across the state. This past week, the California Family Council organized a protest outside Southern California's Yorba Linda High School ahead of the California Interscholastic Federation Southern Section Division III track and field preliminary meet. Demonstrators called on the California Interscholastic Federation, or CIF, to prohibit transgender athletes from competing in girls' sports. Now, this press conference / protest focused on transgender athletes competing in the girls' long jump, high jump, and triple jump events. These organizers state that the athletes entered the competition with the top qualifying marks in all three events. And this is increased criticism from opponents who argue that the CIF policy creates unfair competition for female athletes. Now, currently, the CIF bylaws, which is Bylaws 300D, allow students to participate in athletics according to gender identity. Critics argue that the policy conflicts with Title IX protections, which is intended to preserve equal athletic opportunities for girls and women. Now, there were several speakers at the press conference that the Center Square attended, addressing various crowds during the protest. Among the speakers was Sophia Laurie, who is a former CIF athlete as well as current outreach director at the California Family Council. And Laurie stated during the press conference that the organization intends to provide legal resources to various female student athletes if they want to file something against the state for, as they claim, discrimination against their athleticism and their category, as well as removing various awards and medals that transgender athletes have received since they are competing in girls' sports, and striking their name from records, requesting that these previous awards be given to the second place or third place female athletes. Another speaker at the press conference was Sonia Shaw. She is the current president of Chino Valley Unified School District in Southern California, but is also currently Republican candidate for California Superintendent of Public Instruction. During the press conference, she strongly criticized the CIF leadership as well as Governor Gavin Newsom. Shaw argues that female athletes are losing opportunities earned through years of training and preparation.
I'm going to challenge you men. Start protecting your daughters. There should be more men here than women today. And unfortunately, there isn't. And I, again, am grateful for those of you, like my husband, who says not on his watch. But this is a message to all dads across California. Wake up. These are your daughters. This is the next generation. They should not be here having to fight for basic rights. They should not have to fight for their safety. We have coward men that are voted in to make these decisions and that are causing the harm. But guess what? Everybody's hands in it. As a majority of California, enough. Take it to the ballot boxes. We're done with their insults. Our daughters are paying the price. This is insane. Our girls are suffering. They're unsafe. Every time they enter into any competition or any restroom, they are unsafe. We should not allow that on our watch. They're losing the opportunities that they have worked their entire young lives for. Blood, sweat, tears, sacrifices. I know. I'm the mother of two athletes, one collegiate and one in high school. I've seen it. There's so much sacrifices. You ladies should never have to be in this position. It breaks my heart. And I said, until I go to heaven, I will never stop fighting for our daughters, ever. It's just criminal, this behavior on adults' watch. Enough already.
The Republican gubernatorial candidate Steve Hilton and Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco was also going to attend the press conference to show their support for this protest, but sadly could not attend. But as you see here, many people like these gubernatorial candidates, as well as various lawmakers and people in office in the state of California on more conservative or Republican side, do support the change for these bylaws. And currently, the California Interscholastic Federation has not responded for a comment, especially since the lawsuit is still pending that the U.S. Department of Education has brought against CIF way back in the summer of 2025. Now, many supporters of transgender inclusion in sports pushed back against the criticism. There was some anti-protesters against the protest there in support of transgender athletes competing, saying that they should be included. And the Center Square was able to talk to Gabrielle Antolovich. She is the president of CEO of the Billy DeFrank LGBTQ plus Community Center in San Jose. And Antolovich argues that transgender athletes, while they are a part of these teams and competing in these sports, represent a very, very small percentage and a small portion of athletic competition, and stated that available research does not conclusively prove that a consistent and competitive advantage for transgender women in sports. Now, Antolovich also said and criticized this protest that, these actions are directed at transgender athletes, and it could eventually expand into a broader restriction affecting women in general. Something Antolovich highlighted was, well, what about women that maybe are more masculine or don't want to wear dresses or want to wear makeup? Is that the next step coming after them? And so kind of something Antolovich highlights, kind of criticizing the protests, is that they don't really draw a line. Where does that end? Is it only after this 0.0001% of the population of sports, or does it continue on? Something she added as well is that there are less than 10 students transgender students competing in the NCAA, which is college sports currently, and that's compared to over 500,000 female athletes in the NCAA currently. Additionally, her comments emphasize participation, inclusion, and sportsmanship over medal counts and rankings. Something Antolovich highlights is, well, yeah, sure, the medals and the rankings are great, but Antolovich told the Center Square that it should be about sportsmanship. It should be about coming together and camaraderie and team support rather than just winning first place. And so if you'd like to continue to follow this developing story, as well as LGBTQ plus issues across the country, you can go to thecentersquare.com under our education section. Next, President Trump is preparing for a major 2-day visit to China, marking the first trip to Beijing since 2017. Now, this meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping comes amid growing tensions involving trade, artificial intelligence, the war in Iran, fentanyl trafficking, and human rights. Now, here to tell us a little bit more about this meeting and what to expect is the Center Square's Sarah Roderick Fitch. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I think first, starting out, there's a lot that's going to be happening in the next 2 days. So I think first, let's highlight, what are the issues that are expected to dominate the discussions this week, and what's going on. And I think the big question is, why now after 9 years of waiting?
Well, they did meet, actually, two leaders did meet actually last year when the president was in Asia during a trip there. But the president hasn't actually visited China since 2017. So this is a huge deal. And of course, really sort of China and the United States are seen as sort of the two big major superpowers in the world, and obviously sort of at odds. This is going to be 2 days jam-packed. The president's actually going to be returning to the White House Friday. This will be, yes, very, very busy. There's going to be a lot of stuff on the agenda. One of them, the president has taken a number of tech CEOs with him on the trip, including Elon Musk, who flew aboard Air Force One and arrived with the president at Beijing early this morning, or later in the day, as it is Beijing time. And so one of those things is going to be, obviously, is going to be the whole AI race, which the United States and China sort of are locked into. But I think the president's bringing all this tech power to sort of go in, hey, we're flexing our muscle. But he also wants to sort of open things up and open that communication and being able to sort of have those jobs and to create, I think, more of a connection and sort of a line between the two nations. Another thing is going to be, obviously, is going to be, there's like the issue with fentanyl. The president has, and actually FBI Director Kash Patel had been to China and some of his counterparts over there to talk with China about cutting down and curbing the flow of the precursors to making fentanyl. Supposedly they were going to go ahead and do that. Really, there hasn't been too much of an update. However, that will be likely a topic with the president. That is a very huge deal when it comes to that. Human rights is going to be an issue. The president has mentioned some individuals, religious and political prisoners that are over there. He's been asked, hey, are you going to be, confronting President Xi on this? And the president has said a number of times, yes, he is going to go ahead and do that. Now, the other big issue, of course, that the president has kind of downplayed, but is going to be a huge deal, is going to be the situation that's going on in Iran, because China is Iran's largest consumer of oil. And China gets about 40% of its oil from that region and that area. So, I mean, this is and from Iran, they get a lot of cheap oil. So that is a huge deal. They kind of are aligned, and they've been sort of selling weapons and providing them that. The president had mentioned one of the ships that had been intercepted was a Chinese ship. Apparently, according to different watchers, marine watchers, there was a marine vessel that was connected to a cargo ship connected to China that did actually get through the Strait of Hormuz yesterday. I think there was only two. The Strait of Hormuz is shut down. I think that's going to be pushing them, because that's important to China. China needs that oil, and the blockade is hurting.
President Trump had a lot to say about that right before he left. Over 50% of China's oil gets imported and transited through the Strait of Hormuz. And so this is kind of what he had to say to reporters before he left.
What is your message to President Xi as it relates to the Iran war?
Well, I think, number one, we're going to have a long talk about it. I think he's been relatively good, to be honest with you. You look at the blockade, no problem. They get a lot of their oil from that area. We've had no problem, and he's been a friend of mine. He's been somebody that we get along with, and I think you're going to see that good things are going to happen. This is going to be a very exciting trip. A lot of good things are going to happen.
Mr. President, do you think he needs to intervene at all with the Iranians?
I don't think he does.
Can help in any way?
No, I don't think we need any help with Iran. We'll win it one way or the other. We'll win it peacefully or otherwise. Their Navy's gone, their Air Force is gone.
So it seems like Trump is very positive in how this conversation is going to go. And especially it seems like Trump is wanting to lean on China's influence to kind of clear that vital pathway. From your perspective and what you've been reporting on, how important is China's relationship when it comes to what's going on with Iran and the U.S. strategy as a whole within the Middle East?
I mean, it's very important. China plays a huge role in China and in Iran, and not just actually Iran. When it comes to Venezuela, what the president did with Venezuela, a lot of these countries, really, when we think about it, the things that the president has done really impact China and China's world. They're sort of their world power. It's sort of, in a way, he's sort of has been trying to sort of chip away at it. That sort of underline there, that's not really stood there. But yeah, it is going to be very important to have China try to get on board and trying to get them to open that, to try to get that Strait of Hormuz open, because this current blockade, the naval blockade that is still in effect, that the United States is doing, is actually hurting China. I mean, it is hurting their oil production and getting that sort of that cheap oil. They're not getting that. They're kind of playing it like, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal, but it is a big deal. And obviously it's a major deal to Iran, because Iran depends so much. As I said, I think it's between 90 and 91% of the oil sold from out of Iran goes to China. They are the largest consumer. So Iran certainly needs China, and the president does realize that they need that. And so this could really, China could sort of help urge or try to put pressure on the Iranians to really kind of, release things secure things in the Strait of Hormuz, and possibly being able to do that. Now, the question is, though, is, who's in this leadership in Iran. That's a whole other story. Seems the president has said, and people in the administration have said that it's a very fractured government. You have the IRGC and the mullahs, and then you have some of the people that I guess the president has said that they've been sort of working on trying to negotiate a deal. So the question really comes down to is who would China be communicating with? Would they be communicating with the same people, or are they going to be able to communicate with the IRGC? And the IRGC, they need to pay their soldiers. They need to get that money. And while that blockade is still in effect, they're not getting that money. As it said, it's about they're losing about $500 million a day on their economy, and it's hurting. I mean, they can't keep all these oil reserves because it's got to go somewhere, and it's just been sort of locked in there. So China could really potentially play a very important role if the president, is successful in putting that pressure on them. It's just a matter of whether China, wants to do this or not. As I said, yeah. China, this is part of China's sort of global power. Then they have helped with weapons and everything else. So it benefits them having sort of that power and everything else too. So it'll be really interesting to see, what comes of this.
Yeah, and we'll definitely look forward to the developing stories and updates that you can find at thecentersquare.com as Sarah continues to report on these meetings in the next couple of days. So I think Iran is seeming like the big, pressure, negotiations, conversations here. But something else that you mentioned that I'd like to talk about as well is this new race for artificial intelligence, right? Is the U.S., and do you think President Trump, is he worried that, China might be surpassing America when it comes to AI development? Because I know specifically within education, the president's wife, Melania Trump, has definitely taken strides to help with that artificial intelligence and integrating it within education.
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the big pushes too, is the president has been pushing for these data centers, but also he has signed an executive order to ensure that, because one of the issues with these data centers in these communities, of course, there's been a lot of pushback because of energy consumption and energy prices went up. So saying, hey, okay, energy companies, they have to build their own power sources, right? So the president is trying to sort of, he's trying to appease both sides, saying, okay, well, data centers are going to, they're going to have to produce their own power, so they're not going to be taking from the same grid. And in a way, it's because the president, realizes that the United States has to keep up with China in this AI race, because they are building quite a bit. There was even a report, I'm not exactly sure how true it was, but I did see, I think it was Google, and I can't remember, maybe SpaceX, I can't remember, was considering doing a data center in space. Those things, they're really trying to get there. And there's well over a dozen of these tech CEOs, like I mentioned. Elon Musk is one of them, headed there. The president is he took several with him on Air Force One, elevating that as a very important role, to sort of saying, hey, look, we have all these, big companies we're talking about, and bringing them and presenting them to the Chinese government. And also one of the issues too, along that line too, is some of these intellectual, property rights sort of stuff that goes into some of that the data center stuff. So all that sort of comes into play. And so the president will be bringing that in there and really trying to sort of, I think kind of saying, hey, we're advanced and here's where we're going. But I think he also wants us to sort of work together on that. He sees it as an opportunity for the two countries to come together and work on that. But I mean, what is interesting at the end of the day is that the United States and this is China, and China is a communist country. So there are some restrictions. There are a lot more restrictions, especially when it comes to AI. So it'll be really interesting to see where things go. Does that constrain them? Possibly. I don't, those things, there's a lot more constraints there in a communist country, obviously, not having necessarily the free, press, all that sort of stuff. they have that. And here in the United States, we have that. And so I think the president might also be wanting to entice some people too, is going, hey, we have it great over here, and you're free to, really, explore, your business where we accept you, and we're going to support you and everything like that. It'll be interesting to see what comes from it.
Yeah. And a big question too on that front, and there's been some concern around the country as well, is the social media question, right? Who owns those platforms? Are Americans' privacy, respected and valued? Like you said, intellectual property. So lots to come from that conversation. Finally, there are some kind of loose ends that we need to tie up here at the other subjects that you kind of talked about when it comes to fentanyl, human rights. Something that you mentioned is there could be potential conversations of freeing some individuals that have been kind of held in China. Could you kind of finish us off here talking a little bit about that, and I think ultimately what President Trump hopes to accomplish with those conversations?
Yes, I don't think those are going to probably be the tops of the top issues, but they are. He absolutely, especially with Secretary Rubio. Secretary Rubio is going along, and Secretary Rubio is a huge proponent of human rights. He always has been, obviously, with the whole situation in Cuba, his family from Cuba. So that really hits home with him. I think that's going to be a major issue with him as well. But yes, unfortunately, China has a long history of, persecution, religious persecution, whether it's with the Uyghurs or there's underground churches in China that have been persecuted, and there's been imprisoned, and also political persecution too, especially when in Hong Kong. Jimmy Lai is one of those individuals, Hong Kong, and his daughter, he was here in the United States, and she has been lobbying, for the president to say, hey, can you get him to come home? And I think for the president, I think that also would be actually a huge, big deal to him if he could get some of these prisoners released, before he leaves. I think he would like to secure it. I think it would also be a small gesture on the part of the Chinese government to say, hey, we are serious. We want to work with you. Because now remember, I don't know if you knew or you didn't know this or not, but Xi is expected to visit the United States here before the end of the year. We don't know exactly when that's going to be, but the president has indicated it'll be before the end of the year. So there are going to be other visits with each other and other meetings. So this is there could be this grand gesture of releasing these. But yes, those will definitely be issues. And I think Secretary Rubio may be kind of the one headlining that stuff. And perhaps knowing the president, he will probably be doing some of the wheeling and dealing behind the scenes. So we'll see what happens. But I think for him, it would give him a lot of satisfaction if he could bring these prisoners home and out and back to their families. But it will be a huge deal, especially, like I said, with there's the Uyghur issue and the religious persecution that has been going on for decades, along with the political persecution, has really been a major issue there in China.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have the Center Square, Sarah Roderick Fritsch. Greatly appreciate your time. Thank you so much. To follow the latest developments of how these meetings reveal and result in the next coming days, you can find that on our website at the Center Square on the national page. Finally, quick hits from America's Talking with headlines from across America. If you would like to read more about these stories, the articles will be linked in the description below. Starting out with the first state of Pennsylvania. Now, there's been some frustration over secretive data center proposals in Pennsylvania that has prompted lawmakers and activists to hold a virtual town hall criticizing developers and calling for stricter oversight. Now, Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, has defended responsible AI-related growth, but has declined to engage directly with organizers. So similarly, this is happening all over the country, conversations of artificial intelligence and whether, this is continued growth or there needs to be restrictions. Next, in the state of Georgia, currently Georgia Governor Brian Kemp has cut over $300 million from Georgia's 2027 budget to offset revenue losses from newly signed tax cuts, while preserving existing programs and warning that the state may still need to reserve funds to balance the budget. Next, in the state of Arizona, Senate Majority Leader John Kavanaugh said Arizona lawmakers may sue Prima County after Attorney General Chris Mays ruled the county's policy limiting corporations with federal immigration enforcement is legal under state law. Next, out of the state of California, California lawmakers warned that worsening wildfires could overwhelm the state's wildfire insurance fund, originally signed for over $21 billion in claims and now projected to cost taxpayers over $39 billion. And this has prompted many discussions about extending the fund and expanding wildfire mitigation efforts since the Palisade fires in January of 2025. Finally, out of the state of New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani unveiled a $127 billion balanced budget that closes a $12 billion budget deficit without major tax hikes or using reserve funds, relying instead on targeted revenue changes and new state aid from Kathy Hochul, who's the governor of New York State. While this plan drew much sharp criticism from Republicans over its tax and spending priorities. Well, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Center Square on our YouTube channel, as well as find all the latest developments on our website at The Center Square. Well, from my studio here in Southern California, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm your host, Esther Wickham. We'll be back on Thursday looking at more stories that impact you, the taxpayer, only here on The Center Square Daily.